guys. I'm going to do a little video for you guys on forging a hidden-tang hunting knife with a little 4-inch hunter. This is just a small bar of random pattern Damascus that I have lying around. About an 1 inch by 1/4 inch thick, maybe 6 inches long. Probably use most of this in that one. First thing I'm going to do is going to heat the forging.
So the first thing I'm going to do is point the bar. So I'm just pointing from basically one side, and that'll make the pattern kind of flow to one side a little bit. Since this is pattern weld, I'm trying to keep it pretty hot. Alright, so that's now done. Now I'm going to start to shape the point. And kind of round and blend and smooth. Next I'm going to do a distal taper. So I'm forging a taper from the point back to the break-in angle. And I want this to be a nice linear taper. Once I have that taper, I'm going to go back and adjust the shape again. And then readjust the taper. Like that. What that taper does is it kind of pushes the volume out toward the point so that when I forge the bevels in, I don't have to forge that as thin, which means I get less rise from forging the bevels, from extending that edge. The second thing it does is it means that my tip doesn't pooch out super wide when I forge the bevels in. Alright, that preform is done. The next step, I'm going to forge in. I've turned this around, I believe. And I'm going to forge in a small notch at where I want my ricasso. Doesn't have to be very deep, and I'm just going to thin the rest of that material. And this is going to be where I forge in my bevel starting. By forging the notch first, not only does it give me a visual sign of where that edge is going to start, but it also allows me to have some of that material go backwards so I can square the back of that choil up. The ricasso, and then I have plenty of meat for the tang there. But that's as far as I'll take that, so I'm going to turn that around when I put it in the forge this time. And the next heat I'll start beveling. So I'm going to bevel along this edge here so that I can go down past 0. And you see, trying to keep that more or less in line. I'm moving the bar, not my hammer. My hammer is staying in the same place, same set of angles. And this side I'm going to actually move up a little toward the middle of the bar and forge the bevel again. And you see that tip's already risen basically back to straight. It'll go back down a little bit as I forge the bevel up to the spine and forge more distal taper in. But a lot of times I end up having to straighten out the knife a little bit. Just keep on beveling. And a good time to straighten out is at the end of the heat when the edge is a little bit cooler, because it'll be affected less. Now on these I don't like to put a whole lot of distal taper in the upper portion of the knife because I'd like to see that kind of have room for grinding. I'm going to use the cross peen to pull that heel out a little bit, just to square up the back of that choil. Both sides. You'll see I'm not putting the ricasso ever on the anvil. The ricasso stays off of the anvil, always. I'm going to slide up and square that choil up a little bit. Good way to send the knife across the room, but that's okay. Forge back down this way, and back out that way. And what this does is it thickens the back of that choil a little bit. So I have a few more options when I go to grind this knife. I have a little bit more meat there to be able to push things around. Quite honestly, that is the part of a knife that gives me the most trouble, always, in forging and in grinding. That transition. That's why I love saxes. No transitions. I'm just going to keep working that area and square it up. Yep, just kind of adjusting the profile and shape, and then thinning the edge again. Forge this pretty close to shape. I'm going to leave this a little thicker and a little wider in every dimension than I would on a monosteel knife, just because I like to be able to get into the pattern a little bit, make sure I'm down below any decarb from welding or whatnot. You know, if it's monosteel and you have a little decarb, you don't really see it because you're always going to get past at the edge anyway. But in Damascus, it can be a little bit more of an issue. And if you have one spot of decarb, it'll look horrible in there. So, all right. So now I'm going to square up my ricasso a little bit, and then I'll begin to forge into the tang. Putting a little flat up into the top of there. Square up that transition. There we go. Back down towards that bevel in a little more. You'll notice I'm using a lighter, flatter faced hammer for this, so I'm kind of getting a little bit more detailed forging on there. You notice I'm angling the knife. I'm trying to make that plunge come up at an angle to the blade. And the reason for that is, again, it gives me more options in when I grind it, where that top of that plunge wants to be. The bottom of the plunge is fairly well dictated, but the top is not. To pick a trick I picked up from Lynn Ray, and it's a good one. Now I'm finishing off that ricasso area. There we go. Okay. Pretty good. I'm being a little more fussy within this than I probably need to be. Just going back and adjusting thicknesses and planes and making sure I've gotten this forged nice and evenly. Not really much to say when I'm just keep doing the same thing. All right. So planishing is a good trick because it helps to keep the surfaces flat enough to go right onto the grinder and not really have to grind too much off. just angles. You know, you get that surface really flat, it's easy to go onto the grinder and just pick up that angle and just continue it. Maybe shift it one direction or the other. But if you have a bunch of faceting going on, it's very easy to pick up the wrong facet, and then it makes the grinding much more difficult. So, good forging makes grinding easier. Good grinding makes polishing easier. Good polishing makes good fitting easier. Everything leads to the next step. That's looking pretty good. All right. Now I'm going to start to draw the tang back out. All right, back to the big hammer. And I'm going to start by making a point. Not all the way down to nothing, but close. This just starts to get the volume out. I want to leave basically 1-inch square ricasso at the base. I'm going to trim that back some later, but I want to leave it. If I had enough material, I could just draw a taper out and then grind the shoulders in, and actually that's probably the best way to do it. In this case, I'm a little short, so I want to make a little bit longer tang than that. So I'm going to put in some shoulders. But I'm going to draw this out a little bit more first. The longer it is, the easier it is to put the shoulders in, because the less you have to move. And you see how I'm staying out of that 3/4, 1-inch square section there. That section there. Just straightening it out. All right. Now I'm going to put those two shoulders right about there. And to do that, I'm going to actually draw that out over the edge of the anvil. I'm going to use the edge of the anvil and the edge of the hammer to form two shoulders at the same time. Now, if you watch, I'm angling that hammer over, really kind of trying to hammer straight down-ish. Just notice I'm actually hammering at an angle. That's weird. There we go. You see those two form. Now, if you're onto the anvil too much, you'll get a shoulder on top. If you're off of the anvil too much, you'll get a shoulder only on the bottom. If you're right in line, you'll get a shoulder on both sides. And it's not easy to do, but it is a good skill and one that's worth learning. And they don't have to be perfect, because I'm gonna go back with a file guide and square those up anyway and grind it. I just want to move more of that volume out into the tang so that I have enough room, and I want to leave enough room in there to have that ricasso square up. And I like a reasonably short ricasso anyway, so it's not like it has to be perfect. You saw me hit the ricasso. I was trying to shift the shoulder over. So basically I was doing a half face blow. I was hitting the ricasso and supporting just on the tang. Now I'm just trying to square that back up. You see, this goes on the rhombus quite a bit. I don't know why, but it always seems to go rhombus quite a bit when you're forging these out. So there's going to be always a lot of correction. Now, rhombus happens, you just got to correct. Alright, back to planishing. Light, fast blows. Those light, fast blows tend to work just the surface of the material, so you tend to get all those little hammer marks out and smooth that surface up, rather than getting deep hammer marks again. And now I'm going to start to straighten this out. Now I'm straightening the spine. Now I'm straightening the whole blade. That spine straightening was actually because I had a thickness change in the spine. And I'm trying to even that taper up. That's the only time I want to have that ricasso on there, is when I'm trying to even those tapers together. Otherwise, I want that ricasso off and always working on that flat, that bevel rather. That looks pretty good. It's standing on its own. That's a good sign. So I like to start at one end and fix the as I go. So now I'm sighting to see if it's centered on the ricasso, which it is, and straight, which it looks like it. Now I'm going to do the same on the tang. You'll notice I'm working much cooler. This is skewing the color. I am just into the reds here, because I'm just bending. I'm not trying to make it crazy hot. Looks like I shifted something off in here. There you go. Pushing that center line again. Taking a step back and looking helps. You can also put some welder's chalk on the edges to help see. Soapstone. That can help. This looks cold, but there's actually still color in it. In reality, it's a dull red. As long as I have color in there, I can straighten. So here we go, the final forging. You can see all the features are forged into this pretty accurately. It's reasonably thick at the edge, maybe a little over a nickel's width. But like I said, with Damascus, I like to leave it a little thicker anyway. And maybe about a quarter at this point. Thanks for watching.